Alexander Hayes was on what he hoped would be his last blind date. His assistant had been pestering him for months to get back out there, finally wearing him down with promises that Victoria was perfect for him. Now, he sat across from Victoria at an upscale restaurant, wondering how quickly he could escape. Victoria was beautiful, objectively stunning, actually with dark hair and a red dress that turned heads. But 15 minutes into dinner, Alexander was already exhausted. She'd spent the entire time talking about her social media following, her designer wardrobe, and the vacation homes she expected her future husband to provide. Of course, I'll need a house in the Hamptons, Victoria was saying, and somewhere in Europe. Paris, probably. Maybe the south of France. Do you have properties there? No, Alexander said flatly. Well, you should. Someone in your position. I saw your net worth online, very impressive. We could travel so much. I've always wanted to see Bali. First class, obviously. Alexander was contemplating faking an emergency when the waitress approached their table. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with blonde hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore the restaurant's standard uniform, white shirt, black apron. How is everything? The waitress asked politely. Fine, Victoria said dismissively, not even looking at her. Can you bring more wine? And make sure it's the expensive one this time. I could tell the last glass was from a cheaper bottle. Alexander saw the waitress's jaw tighten, but she maintained her professional smile. Of course. I'll be right back. As she turned to leave, she stumbled slightly, and a small piece of paper fell from her apron pocket onto the table in front of Alexander. She met his eyes for just a second, a deliberate look, before walking away. Victoria was checking her phone, not paying attention. Alexander picked up the paper and unfolded it. She's not who you think. Check her Instagram, at @VictoriaDiamond. She's a gold digger who targets wealthy men. This is her 5th blind date this month. You seem nice. You deserve better. Your waitress. Alexander's blood ran cold. He pulled out his phone and searched for the Instagram handle. There it was, Victoria's account, public and extensive. Post after post of her at expensive restaurants with different men. Captions like, another successful evening, and networking with the elite. Comments from her friends congratulating her on landing another one. Alexander looked up at Victoria, who was still absorbed in her phone. He felt anger rising, not just at being deceived, but at the calculated way she dismissed the waitress, treated service staff like they were invisible. When the waitress returned with wine, Alexander said, "Excuse me, could I speak with you for a moment? Privately?" The waitress looked nervous, but nodded. They stepped away from the table, Victoria barely noticing. "Thank you for the note," Alexander said quietly. "That took courage. I'm sorry if I overstepped. But I've waited on her 5 times in the past 3 weeks. Always with a different man. Always the same routine, expensive wine, talk about houses and vacations. Then I overhear her in the bathroom on the phone, bragging about hooking another rich one. I couldn't watch it happen again without saying something. What's your name?" "Emma. Emma Peterson." "Emma, you didn't overstep. You saved me from making a terrible mistake. Can you do me a favor? In about 2 minutes, bring me a note, anything written on paper. Doesn't matter what it says, and tell me it's urgent. I need an excuse to leave." Emma smiled. "I can do that." Alexander returned to the table. 2 minutes later, Emma approached with a concerned expression. "Mr. Hayes? I'm so sorry to interrupt, but there's an urgent call for you at the host stand. They said it's your office, an emergency." Alexander stood immediately. "I'm so sorry, Victoria. I have to take this. Please, enjoy dinner. It's paid for." He handed Emma his credit card. "Put it all on this, including a generous tip for our excellent service." Victoria looked annoyed, but waved him away, already texting someone else. Outside, Alexander waited for Emma's shift to end. When she emerged an hour later, he was still there. "You waited?" Emma looked surprised. "I wanted to thank you properly, and to apologize for bringing that kind of person into your workplace. You handled her rudeness with incredible grace. It's part of the job. You learn to smile through a lot. It shouldn't be." "Emma, can I buy you coffee? Or dinner? Somewhere you don't have to work?" "Over coffee, Alexander learned Emma's story. She was a graduate student studying social work, waiting tables to pay for school. She'd grown up in foster care, understood what it meant to be overlooked and dismissed by people who thought they were better. That's why I couldn't let it go, Emma explained. I've spent my life being treated like I'm invisible by people who think wealth makes them superior. When I saw Victoria treating you like a target and me like furniture, I knew I had to say something. Maybe it was unprofessional, but it was right. It was absolutely right. Emma, would you have dinner with me? A real date, not a blind setup with ulterior motives? You want to date your waitress who just sabotaged your blind date. I want to date the woman who had the courage and kindness to save a stranger from a gold digger, who treats service work with dignity instead of shame, who sees through superficial charm to real character. Over the following months, Alexander and Emma dated. She insisted on paying for her own meals, refused expensive gifts, and was more interested in Alexander's character than his bank account. She finished her degree, started working at a nonprofit helping former foster youth, and showed Alexander what authentic connection looked like. Can I tell you something? Alexander said 6 months after that disastrous blind date. Victoria was objectively beautiful, successful on social media, said all the right things about wanting to be with me. But she was performing. Emma, you weren't trying to impress me. You were just being yourself, honest, kind, brave. That's what real beauty looks like. A year after Emma had dropped that note on his table, Alexander proposed at the same restaurant, with Emma's manager's permission. At the same table where they'd first met. Emma, you dropped a note on my table telling me my date wasn't who I thought. That note changed my life. You showed me that character matters more than appearances, that someone who treats waitstaff with respect matters more than someone who orders expensive wine. Will you marry me? Let me spend my life with someone who sees through superficiality to truth. At their wedding, Emma gave a toast. I was Alexander's waitress on what was supposed to be his perfect blind date. But his date was a gold digger who treated me like furniture. So I broke protocol and dropped a note warning him. I could have been fired, but I couldn't watch a good person get deceived. Sometimes breaking the rules is the right thing to do. Sometimes the best relationships start with someone taking a risk to tell an uncomfortable truth. And sometimes, the person serving your dinner ends up being exactly who you needed to meet. Sometimes disasters lead to blessings. Sometimes the waitress is wiser than the date. Sometimes a dropped note changes everything. And sometimes, the person warning you about who someone really is becomes the person you want to be with forever. If this story touched your heart, please like and share it. Subscribe for more stories about seeing through deception, valuing character, and finding real love. Your stories inspire us all.